The 22nd of February, 1943. 10 years into Nazi rule, Germany's push to dominate every corner of society leaves no room for free thought. On a cold morning, the young members of the resistance group, the White Rose, stand accused of treason in a crowded Munich courtroom. Their crime? Handing out leaflets urging Germans to see the cruelty of Hitler's war. Instead of a fair trial, they face a scripted show of power. The judge's booming voice cuts off any attempt to speak. Still, the students, members of the famous German anti-Nazi resistance group, the White Rose, remain calm, refusing to betray their belief even as rage and scorn close in around them. The verdict was predetermined. The members of the White Rose resistance group were sentenced to death. Their execution would be carried out by a man who had become a tool of Nazi policy, responsible for the deaths of thousands. His name is Johann Reichhart. Johann Baptist Reichhart was born on the 29th of April, 1893 in the small settlement of Wiechenbach, near the town of Wörth an der Donau, then part of the German Empire. His family had a unique and grim occupation. For 8 generations before him, his ancestors had worked as executioners. It was a job that isolated the Reichharts socially, but also provided them a livelihood and a certain official status that few others held. In 1902, when Johann was still young, his father died, and he was raised by his mother. After receiving elementary education, he did an apprenticeship as a butcher. When the First World War broke out in the summer of 1914, he was drafted into the German army and served as a soldier. Like so many other young men of his generation, he experienced the horrors of trench warfare, but survived and saw the destruction of the German Empire. After the war ended in 1918, Germany was transformed into a republic. The old monarchy disappeared, and the new democratic Weimar Republic struggled with economic crisis, political violence, and the loss of national pride. Reichhart returned to civilian life and tried to run a butcher shop. He got married and had 3 children. However, in the early 1920s, hyperinflation and the Depression ruined countless small businesses, and he was no exception. Unable to make a living, he looked for other ways to support his family. In April 1924, the Bavarian Ministry of Justice appointed Johann Reichhart to a grim and solitary profession. He took over as the official executioner of Bavaria, following in the footsteps of his uncle, Franz Xaver Reichhart, who had served in the same role for many years. The job came with fixed payments, 150 marks per execution, a daily allowance of 10 marks, and free travel by third-class train. Despite these provisions, the position soon became unstable and uncertain. The reason was that from 1924 to 1928, the number of executions began to drop sharply in the Weimar Republic. In 1928, only 1 execution took place. This sharp decline made it difficult for Reichhart to provide for his family. He applied for and was granted permission to take on other work, even outside Germany, and no longer had to live in one fixed location as was originally required of him. Due to the economic problems in Germany, he gave up his transport business in 1925, and then his tavern in 1926. In an effort to survive, he became a traveling salesman. Reichhart eventually tried to leave his position entirely. In 1928, he asked to terminate his contract with the Ministry of Justice, but his request was denied. He left Germany and moved to The Hague, where he made a fresh start as a vegetable dealer. His new life seemed successful, and for a while he kept his former identity a secret, but this would not last. In the spring of 1931, and again in July 1932, Reichhart returned briefly to Munich to carry out 2 separate executions at Stadelheim prison. After the second trip, several Dutch newspapers uncovered and reported his past as an executioner. The news damaged his business and destroyed his second career. With his reputation ruined, Reichhart returned to Munich in the spring of 1933. The steady decline of his fortunes made him question whether he should remain in his grim profession at all. Everything changed for him when the Nazis came to power in January 1933, and the German justice system was quickly transformed. The new regime expanded the use of the death penalty to suppress political opposition, eliminate so-called racial enemies, and install fear across society. New laws introduced capital punishment for a wider range of crimes, including treason, undermining military morale, and other offenses. Johann Reichhart's career as an executioner entered a new phase. On the 22nd of June 1933, he signed a new contract with the Bavarian Ministry of Justice. This agreement gave him a much higher fixed annual salary, which was now paid monthly. By January 1934, after further negotiations with the Bavarian judiciary, his salary was increased to 3,720 Reichsmarks per year. With his finances secured, Reichhart no longer had to worry about supporting himself. Alongside his official duties, Reichhart also joined several Nazi organizations, and on the 1st of May 1937, he joined the Nazi Party. As time went on, Reichhart's work extended far beyond the region of Bavaria. He carried out executions in places like Cologne, Berlin-Plötzensee, Frankfurt-Prongesheim, Göden, and Breslau, today's Polish Wrocław. Between 1938 and 1944, he was also responsible for executions in the Austrian cities of Vienna and Graz. By the end of the Second World War, Reichhart had executed a total of 3,010 people, 2,951 by guillotine, and 59 by hanging. Among them were 250 women. One of his most well-known executions took place on the 22nd of February, 1943. That day, he put Hans and Sophie Scholl to death, members of the famous White Rose student resistance group. Later, he said that he had never seen anyone face death with such courage as Sophie Scholl did. Reichhart also executed members of the Nazi elite who had turned against Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime. After the failed assassination attempt on Adolf Hitler on the 20th of July 1944, the pace of executions increased rapidly. By the end of that year, Reichhart had also been designated the executioner for prisons at Munich, Stadelheim, Stuttgart, and Bruchsal, where many of the condemned conspirators met their end during the final months of the war. Reichhart was known to prepare meticulously for each execution. The condemned would be led into the execution chamber, their name confirmed, and their sentence read aloud. Reichhart would then guide them to the guillotine, secure them, and complete the act. His assistants handled the body afterward. He loved his work so much and served the Nazi regime so loyally that he made several technical modifications to the guillotines used in Nazi Germany. These changes were intended to accelerate the execution process and minimize the suffering of the condemned. After the end of the war, Reichhart was arrested by members of the US Army in May 1945 and taken to Munich Stadelheim prison for 1 week. Because of his role in carrying out executions during the time of Nazi justice, he was not immediately permitted to resume any official duties. In the first months of occupation, many former officials of the regime were detained or banned from public employment. Reichhart was interrogated about his work and his knowledge of the sentences he had enforced. Ironically, he was employed afterward by the US representatives in Germany until the end of May 1946. He hanged around 20 convicted war criminals at the War Criminals Prison in Landsberg in Bavaria, in Germany. The occasionally repeated claim that he trained American Master Sergeant John C. Woods in the use of the gallows and was commissioned by the Americans to oversee the construction of the gallows in Nuremberg has been proved false. The gallows construction was in fact overseen in Nuremberg by Woods himself. One of the reasons was that at the end of May 1946, Reichhart reportedly learned that, due to a case of mistaken identity, he had executed 2 innocent people. From that point on, he carried out no further executions. In total, during his 23-year career as an executioner, Johann Reichhart killed 3,165 people and was the busiest executioner in the 20th century. After his work for the Allies ended, Reichhart faced deep social stigma. In post-war Germany, many people saw him as a symbol of Nazi oppression. In May 1947, Johann Reichhart was imprisoned once again. This time, he faced a Denazification tribunal in Munich. In early September of that year, the court classified him as a major offender and sentenced him to 10 years of forced labor in a labor camp. But the judgment did not stand for long. In December 1948, a new decision downgraded his status to a lesser category. His sentence was reduced to 2 years in a labor camp, along with the confiscation of half his property. After an appeal, the punishment was further eased to 1.5 years, and with only 30% of his assets seized. Since he had already served enough time in custody, Reichhart was released shortly afterward. Reichhart's long and grim career also left deep scars on his personal life. His work had made him an isolated figure. His marriage broke down, and his 23-year-old son Hans, unable to bear the shame and weight of his father's role in the judicial murders of the Nazi era, died by suicide in 1950. After that, Reichhart lived alone, with few friends and even fewer supporters. He spent his final years in poverty, relying on a small pension from his service in the First World War. In his later years, Reichhart publicly spoke out against capital punishment. Despite this, he also accepted honorary membership in a group advocating for his return. His stance was complex, shaped by a lifetime spent at the center of state-sanctioned killing. Johann Reichhart died on the 26th of April, 1972, in the town of Dorfen, near Munich, 3 days before his 79th birthday.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.